I just want to welcome everyone. My name is Sabrina from Queens United Holistic Center. Welcome to Queens United Wellness Week. Today we're going to talk about down-to-earth therapy. So when it comes to talk about down-to-earth therapy, the overall view of what our lovely four panelists want to discuss today is breaking down the myths of therapy, talk about the psychotherapy, how it can help individuals overcome pain in their past and develop coping strategy for our future. This workshop will discuss the stigmas and barriers of men and women and children face when considering therapy, including lack of resources, accessibility, and mindset. So today I'm going to introduce one of our first panelists, Khary. Khary, could you introduce yourself to everyone?
How are you? Hello, everyone. My name is Khary Blackmon. I am a school teacher turned school counselor turned therapist. I now own my own private practice, Triumph Counseling Group. We specialize in treating African American families and individuals of all ages. That's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. And we have our next lovely guest, Jacqui. Can you introduce yourself and your background?
Yes, hi. So I'm Jacqui, founder of Sankofa Healing Studio, a nonprofit. And what I do is really focus on the Black community. I am a social justice art therapist. So I do art therapy. I'm also trained as a play therapist, trained and consultant for an EMDR, and as well as brain spotting. So I really do a lot of the integrative holistic work with body-based sensations and feelings, along with storytelling, to really address racial trauma, oppressive-based traumas, and naming mass incarceration as a trauma in and of itself that plagues the Black community.
Thank you. And last but not least, Les, could you introduce yourself and your background?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Lester Lowery, and I'm a school counselor. I work with high school students, ages 16 to 21 for the School District of Philadelphia, OIC of America alternative program. I'm also a therapist for like several agencies, mainly Carson Valley Children's Aid in Philadelphia. I've been with them for about 5 years, serving adolescents, teenagers, youth, and families, helping to get over some social and emotional issues that may be affecting their family. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, and I think this is going to be a great discussion. And I'm here to learn, as well as here to provide some valuable information that individuals can take home with them. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with you. I'm here to learn as well. Thank you. So before we get started into the questions that's helpful for our attendees, just want to let the attendees know any questions that you have, just make sure you drop it in the Q&A box. So that way, after we finish having our discussion, any question that you have for our panelists, they can be answered. So we're going to start with our first question. So our first question is, why is therapy so important? And any topics that you would want to address. When should you seek therapy, the importance of developing a rapport with a therapist, and breaking down some of the myths of therapy. We'll start with you, Les.
I'm gonna talk about from the adolescents, because some of us might have children or know children that are in school or school age, and I think therapy is important because it is the way that we can cope with some of the issues that we're dealing with, or some of the challenges that we're dealing with in life. And if some things are like getting in your way, or you find things that are getting in your way, relationships are being broken, and home is a struggle, and you're not able to perform to your best of your abilities, and I think that therapy is something that we in our communities need to get over that hump. To get over that hump, to deal with our issues and so forth.
Awesome, awesome. When should parents seek therapy for when it comes to adolescents, when it comes to children?
When there's something impeding a child's growth, I think for a child it could be more so social or emotional issues that the child may be dealing with. It may be issues in the home, maybe issues in the school, but however, whatever is impeding their growth as an individual, I think that it's time to seek some form of therapy or some form of counseling to mediate those issues that the child is having. And that way, in the school, it would be more so, say if a kid isn't coming to school, then what's the issues, what's the challenges, and how can we eliminate those barriers to help the child progress in their schooling. So if you can't do it on your own and you find yourself keep going over and over, and it's a repetitive cycle that you're not getting any breakthrough in your goals, then I think that's when the therapist comes in to help you outline those goals, to help you move forward in life.
Awesome, thank you. Khary?
Yeah, so am I answering when is it important to seek mental health?
Yeah, so basically the myths about therapy, when should individuals seek therapy, and what's the importance of developing a rapport with a therapist?
Okay. So myths around therapy, I think that there's quite a few of them in the African American community. African Americans don't have really a good relationship with any of the institutions throughout America. Through American history, we have to think to the transatlantic slave trade and what that meant for our people, right? African Americans, though incredibly resilient, haven't really had our full rights as American citizens since, we've only had our full rights for about 54 years or so, 56 years maybe. So that comes with a lot of stuff and a lot of distrust in America, period, right? And we see who we have in our office right now in the White House. So that trust continues to be diminished. So I think that some of that mistrust certainly has boiled over into the mental health field. We know for a fact that mortality rate for children of color, for babies, is much higher than that of other races and cultures throughout the country. We know that African Americans are disproportionately represented in special education programs in our school districts. We know that our prisons are filled with people of color as well, right? So all those institutions, all these bad experiences have caused us to have kind of a distrust, right, for any kind of real institution, right? Because even the ones that are supposed to help us and supposed to build us up have done quite the opposite, right? So it's kind of fair that that distrust rolls over into mental health. But the truth of the matter is, it's absolutely necessary to have mental health treatment available to you and to seek it if you need it. And while it's ideal to have it, I think, from somebody who looks like you, who understands all the nuances of being Black in America, even if you weren't to get someone who is Black, chances are they're going to have some good recommendations for you, some things that you can benefit from. But I think that, you know, we're really hurt from some of the things that, you know, we've experienced, and it makes it really hard for us to trust people who don't look like us. And that's one of the reasons why I felt like it was imperative to open Tribe Counseling Group, a place where people can go and get competent counseling and therapy services from Black clinicians who are licensed. So I guess that's just one, and I don't want to take up too much time. I can keep going if you'd like me to.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So Jacqui, same question. When should you seek therapy? And same thing with you when it comes to rapport with your therapist, and breaking down some of the myths.
Okay, whew, so much there to unpack. All right, so let's just name the first thing when we talk about myths around therapy. The platform that we operate within, the structures of psychology and therapy in this country are based on structural racism. So let's just name it as what it is. It was not created in the way that it was done as a way to support any of the mental health and wellness of our people. So I think, for one, it's really important for us to start decolonizing our spaces and breaking some of those boundaries. You know, we don't trust. Why? We shouldn't trust. You know, we don't trust because we're not safe. And if we're talking about systems that weren't created for us and weren't designed by us, they may not be appropriate for us. So I say that, but at the same time, that does not mean that we shouldn't seek services. It's just, I think, as providers, we need to know and name the systems that we're working within. Because when we see our clients, if they've dealt with other people who weren't culturally competent, who did do harm, we need to recognize that and validate those experiences. And we need to do our jobs to decolonize those types of spaces and create other ideas of what therapy could be like. You know, rather than expecting people to say, well, you know, that didn't work, just try again. You know, I know for myself, I take the onus, I take the charge to show it, to be different. Like, therapy is dope. You know, we don't have to be in this environment that's this very strict and confined and clipboards and assessments and notes. We can talk. So when we really talk about the rapport, it's about the relationship. How do you connect with the person you're talking to? I'm not going to trust you if I don't connect to you. I don't care how many letters are behind your name. I don't care if you look like me. And I think that's the reality. And oftentimes we can get caught up in the Eurocentric models and forget that and continue some of that oppression within our own communities, even if we look like the communities that we're serving. So I think that it's really important to recognize that. And I don't look at it as much as being myths, but, you know, I'm going by my experiences. And if we look at structural racism and the different organizations and spaces that we have to work within, you know, we know with school and some of the assessments and how that's used against us and how our children are disproportionately, you know, categorized as being aggressive or non-compliant and, you know, having all of these issues when it's really just a little Black child who's trying to navigate within a system that's not showing them much love. You know, we're not talking about even the home stuff. We're just talking about waking up as Black in this community, waking up and being concerned about the cops coming, you know, waking up and having relatives who have been harassed and having all of these varied experiences. These are the things that bring people into therapy. These are the things, you know, like I just posted something recently, depression. The root of depression is oppression. You know, yes, we do have some significant mental illnesses that we need to discuss. You know, those are ones that there's medication that's involved, there's some biological components to it. But when we're just talking about the emotional, social, our folks are struggling. You know, things aren't all peachy. Some days are harder than others to wake up. We've become numb because there's so much. And I think, And the way that I show up as a clinician to break down some of those barriers to mental health and wellness access is to show up as a real person. I don't show up as, this clinician that does A, B, and C. I show up as somebody that's holding space for you because I see you, I hear you, and I'm going to validate your experiences. And I think that's sometimes the piece and the component with the rapport that's so necessary, that people desire to see people that look like them, because I don't need to explain Blackness. I don't need to explain what it feels like to go into these spaces and feel anxiety and frustrations. And also, how do we hold space for Black rage and Black anger that is so needed, because that's the expression of that unresolved trauma throughout generations. It's not just ours that we're coming into this space with. So I think all of those things are very important. And when do you show up? You show up when there's anything blocking you from being your best self, whatever that is. Or you show up just because you want a space to be able to explore. Something doesn't have to be wrong with you. And I think that's one of the other myths as well. Maybe we're struggling with a decision and it's not really based on I'm depressed and I have anxiety, but maybe my worldview has been compromised by some of the negative media and things that we are, engulfed in, that I've internalized. So you just need someone to help you unpack some of that internalized negative beliefs about yourself, so that you validate and recognize, the powerful being that you are.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacqui. Thank you for that. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next question.
I have something about the last question, because I didn't get to
go ahead. Go ahead.
I realized that I didn't hit rapport, and Jacqui spoke so eloquently. That was awesome. I think, as an educator, somebody who's also worked quite a bit in schools, it's important to, and Les kind of brought up the importance of adolescence, right? And people might have kids here. Therapy for adults oftentimes is a much different thing than therapy for adolescents and children, right? Typically, adults have mowed things over for quite some time. They've looked at a lot of different places and they decide, okay, after some time, I'm really struggling with these things, or I could use some insight, some perspective. So I'm going to go and seek therapy. The pros outweigh the cons, and they arrive. For children, that in adolescence, that decision is often made for them, right? So there's another whole piece there, because you have to first make them want to be there, right? And Jacqui made a lot of good points about just being Black and being familiar with the Black experience is going to make it much easier to make that connection with those young people, right? Young people typically like something that's real and something that they can relate to, right? And like I was saying, if you really have some significant concerns, you're like, I need to go and I need to seek help, that is important. You should do that, even if it's not a Black clinician, right? But it's like the work that it's going to take to build that trust and that rapport is going to just be so much more significant for that clinician that's not of color, because they don't understand your story or who you are or what you come from, right? That it's just going to be harder, right? So I think being a clinician of color makes it a little bit easier for me to relate to adults, children, and adolescents. And, for those adolescents and children who so bad right now need to have somewhere to release. That's just really important, that they can get in, feel comfortable right away, and start to share, because there's a lot that these kids need to talk about.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that really quickly, just the idea of our perceptions, our worldviews. How can I see you as a trusted confidant, as someone who's here that can hold healing space, if you also represent my oppressor? you know, and really understanding that for some people, that becomes a real barrier to be able to see that. So I think that's just another piece with the rapport and piggybacking it, especially, you know, yes, that you can absolutely have great relationships with someone who does not look like you. There are some phenomenal clinicians, you know, not taking anyone, you know, anything away from that. But here's the problem: we don't have enough options. Oftentimes people see folks that don't look like them because they don't have options. You know, we can pick and choose, but when we go to the produce store, we don't want to just have to pick red apples. We want to be able to pick a golden apple, you know, these other types of apples. We want to also look at an orange and a grapefruit. We want variety. Even if we walk out with that red apple, we still want to see that there's all of these other things that are available to me.
Thank you guys for that. Thank you. So I'm going to move on to the next question. We're going to start with you, Les. What at-home coping techniques would you recommend for individuals who don't have access to therapy?
So usually when individuals don't have access to therapy, I usually talk to families and children about, you know, like a healthy regimen that they can get into. And a healthy regimen for me that's very productive is something that allows them to release some stress, right? And it could be anything like a physical activity or some type of coloring activity or some type of activity where they're engaging in other visuals in some type of healthy conversation that allows them to be able to process their thoughts and feelings and stuff like that. You know, I'll give you an example, like, like working out. I know a lot of people work out and a lot of people do running and a lot of people lift weights and stuff like that. But, you know, when you're doing these different activities, you'll find yourself, you know, thinking to yourself, talking to yourself, motivating yourself, right? And then you're in these conversations with yourself. When you're motivating yourself, it allows you to like sort things out in your mind. It allows you to also, most importantly, remove yourself from the situation that may be challenging to you, right? And removing yourself from that situation, you're able to, like, you know, while you're working out or while you're doing something that's productive to you, to your mental state, that allows you to, you know, from an outside perspective looking in, be able to analyze what's going on, right? And be able to categorize different things of importance so you can be able to make the right choices in life, you know. And as a therapist, you know, if you had access to therapy, I think that's what a therapist will mainly help you do, you know, categorize certain things, prioritize certain things in your life so you can be able to focus on certain things, be able to grow, make certain choices in life and stuff like that. So, you know, can't always make it, but there are things that you can do in the home that's productive to you and yourself that allows you to grow as an individual. I would just say, you know, as we are always as individuals are around other people, right? And we're taking on a lot of other issues that other individuals are having in their lives. And it's kind of like a burden on us. And I always tell individuals, like, people, just take a step back. Sometimes you have to spend time with yourself, get to know yourself, so you can think your way through certain things that will help to allow you to be productive in life and stuff like that. But that's if you don't have access to therapy. And it's one more thing, you know, it's like just to piggyback on the last subject, like there aren't a lot of therapists of color in America. Like, you know, it's a slim pickings on you being able to have a therapist of, you know, your color, if your choice, if you're African American, you know. So, but the most important thing is to, like, you know, like me as a clinician, I don't go in as a clinician, I go in as a human being. And as a human being, I want to know, like, I want to like identify with your experiences and stuff like that. And once we get on that page of just identifying with one another, then we're able to, in that, have true meaningful conversations, like we're family members, to be able to help each other out to grow as individuals. So also, if you're home and you have that person that you can talk to, right? They may not be giving the best advice sometimes. However, that's the person that you can just talk to help you sort your thoughts out as well.
Thank you for that, Les. Jacqui?
Oh, I hear access and I get angry. I'm just saying. So let me just name this part. The fact that we are even in a space that we have to talk about, well, if you don't have access, what can you do? We don't talk about that when we talk about our physical health. You know, there's all of these programs. We need to make sure you get your shots and you have all of these things. And our mental health and wellness just isn't held in the same regard, especially for our marginalized communities. That's if you are lucky enough, if you have resources, and that's not the way that it should be. So I think part of the conversation as well is pushing with, why isn't it available? Why don't people have access to quality care? Not, just someone that wants to write a prescription and tell them, let me know if this makes you feel better. So just naming that, recognizing that the Black community, the rates with depression, anxiety, and all of those things are much higher, but we have less access. That's a structural process and problem that we really need to look at revising. But one of the things that, I do suggest for folks is be in community. Just being in community with each other. That is very, very powerful. That's what our people have done for many, many years, is being in community, being able to have that trusted tribe that you can lean on, that you can cry with, that you can laugh with, that you can dance and celebrate with, that you can mourn with. All of those valleys up and down. So I think that's really important to have. And also, give yourself permission to be not okay when you're not okay. That permission that has been robbed from us, from society, fix your face. Isn't that what we tell our kids? Fix your face. This idea of having to not be authentic, not be able to show up in your fullness. So those are the kinds of things. So when we're looking at mental health and not just therapy, but this idea of mental health and wellness, really being able to integrate that in part of our lives, checking your vibrations and protecting your energy. That is extremely important to really be able to pick and choose, what we want to ingest, what we want to absorb, because what we absorb becomes part of how we see the world, part of how we show up in all of our different relationships. And activities, having really intentional activities that oftentimes aren't isolating. So again, that idea of being in community, and community doesn't necessarily have to mean your blood relatives. So having that, having access and knowledge of community programs or things that are going on. And one of the big things that I tell people, and Sabrina, you already know, everybody on planet Earth, I tell you to get you a bottle of bubbles. Bubbles help to regulate us. And I say that because we talk about these intentional breaths and deep breathing and meditating, and that doesn't always resonate with everyone. But when we talk about bubbles, it's like, okay, I know how to do that. So if you know how to blow bubbles, you know how to do intentional breath work. That long, deep breath in and that slow, deep breath outward. And we can envision those bubbles. And as we're looking at them and releasing, we're releasing that negative energy and we're letting it just pop and disappear and but be off of us. So yeah, those kinds of reflective types of activities, and also recognizing that our mental health and wellness is directly connected to our physical being. So making sure that we're drinking water and getting rest whenever possible, and eating the best possible diet that's near us. Recognize it again, we have food deserts. So, there's another barrier, but as best that we can, to really incorporate it in how we live and how we teach our children. So, yeah.
Can I add something before Khary goes real quick? I just wanted to say something. You said that was really, really important, that it's important to be, that you can know that you can be vulnerable in this situation. You touched on that, and you said a lot about it, is that it's important to be vulnerable. And it's important that you know that you can go and have a conversation with a loved one, have a conversation with a friend that can help you through some of the situations that you may be going through. So I just thought that was so important, because, that's, as a clinician, as a therapist, as a school counselor, that's who I think we all are in our professions. We are, at the end of the day, we're human beings, but we are individuals where people can come, right, trust us and have a conversation. Not that I'm always giving feedback, and I don't think that we're always giving feedback, but I think that we're just that ear, right? And some people just need that ear, somebody to listen to them, and as opposed to, being judgmental or feel like you're being judged in your situation. Every situation or every experience is unique. And sometimes, for me, with my friends, because, they're like my therapists, and it's and they are therapists at the end of the day, but however, at most of the times they just listen to me. And then I leave out of that situation like, what, I feel so good. I feel so relieved that, I'm able to go to some friends and family members and have some meaningful discussions, or I'm just allowed to go to them to be able to vent. So I think that's important, to just know that you're vulnerable, know that you can be vulnerable, that you don't have to be this strong individual all the time. And that, because sometimes when you're that strong individual, that causes for some sort of breakdown. And it's important to know that. Khary, I'm sorry, I took your time.
That's okay. Thank you. Khary?
It's all good. I'm apprehensive to answer this question, right? Because kind of like Jacqui was saying, access, right? And the truth is that treatment is more accessible now than it's ever been. So if you're in a place where you feel like, I need counseling, I need therapy or perspective or counsel, there's a lot of options, right? There's options if you don't have money. There's options if you don't have time, right? With telehealth now, right? There's just a lot of options. So the first thing that I would recommend is that, if you really think that it could be a possibility that it'd be good for you to speak to somebody, I would make it a priority to speak to someone. So that's number one. If you absolutely couldn't see someone, then what do you do, right? I think that largely people are doing the best to keep themselves happy and whole, right? And that's why I stress the importance of getting outside perspective, because, we're already trying to operate at our best capacity, right? So there's usually things that we're doing that we might not necessarily know that we're doing, that could be causing us grief, harm, and causing us, not to feel very, very good. So in this question, if you're not able to access a mental health professional, I think it's first really important that you, like Jacqui said, have a community, right? Have a foundation. My foundation is in my religion. I'm a Christian, right? At the end of the day, it helps me to be able to say, I'm going to take this off of me and I'm going to give it to God, right? That gives respite at any time, right? For me, right? So maybe you're not a Christian, maybe you're not religious, but I think that it is really important that you find that foundation or that community that you can, that can provide that release for you. So yes, being able to pray, and, keeping with religion, the Bible says, seek wise counsel for anything, right? So the Bible didn't say go see a therapist, it says seek wise counsel. So what is wise counsel? Find somebody around who you admire. Maybe you don't have a great relationship with this person. Maybe you're not best of friends, right? But you, the way they live their life is it impresses you, right? Or they are accomplishing things in their life that you want to accomplish in your own life. Talk to that person, reach out. Hey, it looks like you've kind of got it together, and I kind of want to be where you are. Do you have any advice, or do you have some time to talk? Right? It would be helpful if you're going to talk to somebody like that to be a little bit more specific, I think, with your question, right? Like, I see your kids are doing very well in school. Maybe that's something that's stressing you out. Like, what do you do? Where do they go? Like, what kind of programs are they in after school, right? So asking very specific questions to people who you respect, who are doing well in that field, I think could be something that's really good. Like Les said, also exercising, any activity that can release positive brain chemicals, dopamine, endorphins. So exercise, hugging or kissing a loved one, or receiving a hug and a kiss from a loved one, saying something kind to somebody, making a to-do list for your day and checking things off of that to-do list as you get them done is very powerful, and is certainly proven to release those positive brain chemicals. And Jacqui kind of touched on how sometimes depression is situational. It's like, or mental health things are situational and have things to do with things happening around us in our environment. But sometimes it is biological, right? Or physiological. And we need to have physiological responses to that. So sometimes that's medicine, and sometimes that's doing what we can to release those positive brain chemicals. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, so we're gonna open the floor for any questions that the attendees may have. If you can just drop your questions in the Q&A or in the comment section, I can ask our panelists any questions you may have.
Cool. I want to add something. I just was thinking as Khary was talking, and when you talk about like seek wise counsel, right? When the Bible says that, and I just was having a conversation with an individual today, and he was just telling me about how, nobody's showing him how to do anything. Nobody's showing him how to, get properties and, flip properties and do X, Y, Z. And listening to this young man, talk about these things. And I was like, well, people who are doing different things, right? And this could be anything, right? People are doing like a lot of things that are positive in the community, positive in the world, right? And I remember somebody telling me, is like, your mentor doesn't like choose you, right? You choose your mentor. And my response to him was, well, if you want it from him, then some way, somehow, you have to take it, not physically take it, but you have to be like that net in that guy's environment where you're just constantly asking questions. And I think that, a lot of times in our community, it seems like people are afraid to ask questions, and I was once that person where it was like, I'm just existing. I wasn't asking questions. I wasn't doing anything. And I remember saying to myself one year, like, you know what? I know too many people that are doing too many positive things. And these positive things is, why not, model my behavior after them, So it's like, let me ask questions. And what I'm finding out is that people who are successful are very generous, and it's indicative of this panel, that's indicative of this week. People are willing to volunteer their time, volunteer their expertise, and that if everybody in the community knows that, right? Everybody in the community knows that people are just not keeping these secrets to themselves, and they're willing to help, then I think that it is also beneficial in helping to move people forward in life, because you have that person that you took their hand and you have to allow them, just like you're allowing a therapist to guide you, to move you forward. You still have to allow the individual in your community to guide you and move you forward as well. So I think that and that's how you seek wise counsel. by allowing that person to guide you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Thank you.
I also had another thought too, again, as we're talking about community. I think one of the things to recognize as well is trauma happens in isolation. You know, trauma is this event, this circumstance that was too overwhelming. Our body, you know, it was just too overwhelming for us. We didn't have whatever resources or ways to coping mechanisms to deal with it. And it happens in this realm of isolation. So when we have conversations with others, when we share with others in a space that we consider sacred or safe for us, that's where healing is promoted. You know, so it's this idea of trauma happens in isolation and healing is promoted when it's witnessed. And that's really, you know, kind of goes back to the therapy. You know, as therapists, you're not here as, you know, I'm going to tell you what you should do with your life. I'm holding spaces for you. And my support doesn't necessarily mean that there's an answer, but my support means that I can look at you and I can hold that space with your pain without looking away. And that's what you get in a therapeutic space that you may not be able to get somewhere else. So I think that's important to name and recognize as well.
Thank you for that, Jacqui. So Khary, I'm gonna address this question to you. How can I help my adult son who needs mental health services but will not seek help?
It depends on the extent of the need, right? If someone is clearly a danger to themselves, to other people, then that would then qualify them for an emergency evaluation, right? So that might mean that they could be violent, they could be very unpredictable walking into the street, they could be, you know, saying that they're going to kill themselves, kill someone else, and just not thinking logically in their best interest. If somebody is at that point, then they will qualify for an emergency evaluation, which in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, we call a 302, right? So you could petition for a 302, and a 302, a lot of times, a myth, to go back to our first question, is that a 302 means that you're going to be involuntarily committed to a hospital, right? But that's false. So the 302 does, it kind of creates a warrant, right? Where this person will be brought into an emergency room to be evaluated by a psychiatrist. That's all it guarantees, right? And the psychiatrist is then able to determine if that person needs to be hospitalized, or if a lower level of care would be more appropriate, like outpatient therapy, intensive outpatient therapy, and you know, at the very top of that is the hospitalization. So yeah, if it really depends on how extreme the situation is. Now, if you have somebody who is, you know, functioning pretty well, going to work, taking care of themselves, eating well, you know, maintaining a job, most of their relationships are good, but you feel like they need therapy, you know, then you don't have too much in your power besides, you know, suggesting, right? I think the worst thing that we can do is tell somebody like, you need therapy, right? But it could be more helpful to say, hey, I know this person, or I heard of this person who seems like pretty cool, they're a dope therapist, a dope Black therapist. I'm thinking about doing it for myself. What do you think about checking it out too, right? Know that it's going to be a process to kind of change their mind over time. And the more you try to force it, the more resistant people typically are to it. But if you set it up where it's like they feel like they are making the decision to go, then oftentimes people will be more likely to jump on the bandwagon, right? But at the same time, for adults, we can wish that people would follow up with services, and sometimes people don't. And all you can do is do what you can, right? So if you tell them, like, I think it's really important, I think it would be really good for you to talk to somebody. I hope that you make that decision, and they continue to not do it, then, it's off of you. You can't live with that pressure. You can't live with that, that guilt, right? And a lot of times we do that. Like, I should have done more, or I could be doing more, but sometimes you can't, and people are responsible for their own happiness, right? So you just have to let them be. What I would do, I would pray for them, be there when I can, and that's it.
Thank you, Khary.
Can I expand on what Khary said for a moment? I think that, sometimes, we kind of like falsely assume that someone needs therapy, right? Like, in dealing with children in school, they might say, oh, this kid needs counseling, this kid needs this, right? But I just think as a professional, as a therapist, I just think it's incumbent upon us to assess the situation, right? Like Khary said, it depends on the situation. And usually I might have a kid or some kid who just has all this energy, right? And I'm looking at this kid like, this kid may not have ADHD. He probably doesn't need special education services or something like that. So I'm always trying to figure out, the alternative. Like, what can we do to help this individual channel this energy? Or if you have a kid in class that's not being challenged, or like, how can we challenge this kid to get the best out of this kid? I think that sometimes, a lot of professionals, a lot of teachers are lazy in their efforts to, get the best out of an individual. And I think as a professional or as a therapist, it's like our job, to pull the best out of the individual, not be so quick to say, this is something that you need. However, giving them some options, some healthy options on what they can do to better themselves, like medication, for instance, like, working in the field, they're so quick to put these children or individuals on medication. And then I'm noticing, like, the dosage is increasing, right? Not only is it increasing, it's changing. And I heard somebody speak, it's like, it's no real exact science to it, right? But however, what's important is that, if you see the beauty in the individual, you can give that individual some coping mechanisms, some coping skills to be able to sustain a healthy lifestyle, a healthy living over a longer period of time without being addicted to some sort of medication. And I think that the ultimate medication is model behavior, positive model behavior. You can be that positive role model in front of that individual, having meaningful, healthy conversations with that individual. And I just think that, if that individual takes heed to what you guys are doing or what you're saying, then ultimately that individual will model their behavior after yours. And that's how you ultimately evoke change. So it depends on what this young man is doing in the house with the parents. Like, if it's like Khary said, if it's like something that's detriment to himself or others, then yeah, you have to, immediately call 911. But I think that it's also important to see the beauty in an individual and say, hey, what can this person do that they like, right? That they could be productive at, that they could utilize that to sustain a healthy living and lifestyle. So it depends on the situation, really.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Like to add a little bit to it. For one, I'm just going to keep it real. If you can avoid calling 911, I'm going to need you to call the crisis response team. I'm just going to say it because I can't be nothing but authentic. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to come from a nurturing standpoint as well. If my child is in crisis, that means I'm in crisis. Mm-hmm. So for a parent, mother, father, whomever that is, when you are working with an adult child that isn't seeking services and you think that there's some troubles there and it's not something where you can get immediate help, what I do also recommend is that you seek services and supports for you. It's very, very important, because when we have disruptions in how we show up and in those relationships, and again, that mental health and wellness is not individualistic. We are naturally a collective group. So what you feel, I feel. And as your mother, I'm feeling it. And that's something that I may need some support in. So I would absolutely recommend, for a mom to be able to also seek some supports for her, because there's going to be some tough and challenging times that may come up from it. She does need to make a tough call, or, just to kind of find out, how do I support this? And I think that's really important as well. And then also just to note, us as parents, when we heal, our children receive it. We parent a little different. We show up in our ability to hold space for that child, even in difficult times. And to be able to do that is so powerful. That does not mean that's a replacement for the child, but it is something that is an adjunctive thing that we can use. Again, really understanding our collective nature within our communities, and holding sacred space for that. So yeah, definitely, mom, find a tribe as well to help navigate that.
So Jacqui, as you're speaking, this next question basically zooms in right on what you were just talking about. So how do you support the children of siblings who has mental illness but unwilling to get help? So if you could just elaborate on that just a little bit more, because that you kind of summed up that question, but just the last part.
Yeah. All of the situations are very individualized. Is this a physiological, challenge that they're struggling with? Is this, emotional, social, like what's all happening? But collectively, as we heal ourselves, we heal our children, we heal our generations. One of the things that they say, when we ourselves heal, we heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. That is a very powerful thing, a beautiful gift that we can not only give to ourselves, but we give to our entire communities. Because the more that I heal, the more I can hold space, and heal people, heal communities. So I think that's really important to understand. And, with me, I specialize with working with people who have been directly impacted with incarceration. So really looking at oftentimes our parents, 85% or more of our women have been physically or sexually assaulted, had some sort of violence before ever being incarcerated. And that very same high number are also the primary caregivers for these children. So we need to look at that. And those are children who are then in the schools with all of these labels and this Eurocentric framework, instead of looking at it as a collective framework to understand all of the things that are integrated within the situation, all these intersectionalities. But what I find is when you are able to provide that healing space for a parent, they show up very, very different. And when they show up different, their children respond differently. We're able to, be able to listen. Because sometimes, as parents, we do what we have to do to protect our children because it's coming from a place of fear. Rightfully so. But as we can move through that and we can come from a different place of healing, we are then able to actually listen, which is something that is kind of lost in translation oftentimes because of the way that society is. But when we pull that back, we make beautiful changes within our families and communities.
Thank you so much for that, Jacqui. Thank you so much for that. I know we want to keep going. The time is getting slow. Closer and closer. I wish, this is, an hour and a half instead of 2, 1. But any questions that were not answered, we definitely will get those questions out to our panelists. Khary, Jacqui, Les, I just want to give my greatest gratitude to you guys for being panelists this evening for Down to Earth About Therapy. This was a truly powerful, powerful conversation.